Matikela, welcome to my YouTube channel. So today I want us to talk about what was happening um, when it comes to the cell phone evidence of choose number three, Mthobisi Mncube. So you would remember that this is not the first time that we are hearing about his cell phone evidence. Mngomezulu touched on this, and Nisi is also putting a stamp on it, but we've heard about this before. You would also remember that before Mngomezulu touched on this, um, Baloyi touched on this, but did it until halfway. And then Mgomezulu came in and was like, I'm going to do the whole shende and I'm going to put it on record because what do you mean that you are going to deal with this section 0205 and leave it halfway? So that is what I remember when it comes to the cell phone evidence. And at this point, you would also understand the digital footprint of Mncube has done wonders and he has exposed a lot of things when it comes to the state case. And this is one of the reasons that you see them panicking and doing all these things that they are doing that are unfavorable, okay, that are not right, that they are doing inside that courtroom. These so-called objections and these, I'm putting this on record, my lord, blah, blah, all of that shandy that they are doing there. So the digital trail that is changing everything when it comes to the case is really putting the state in a difficult position, and they know it, they understand it. Now, that is what we are going to be talking about in this video because it tells a story, a very serious story. What I like about that is that Ncube's cell phone has changed everything. The digital evidence, the digital footprint, the digital photographs, everything, Jay, is shaking everybody who has reasons to shake. So, ladies and gentlemen, today I'm bringing you the cell phone of an ordinary Samsung cell phone, an ordinary Samsung cell phone that has become the battleground in the Senzo Meyiwa murder trial. No confessions now, not a fingerprint, not a DNA this time, a cell phone. Okay. After listening to the evidence presented in court, one thing becomes very clear. This is no longer just a murder trial. It is a digital forensic battle where every cell phone tower, every timestamp, every photograph, and every minute of the clock could influence how the court assess the evidence. So today we are taking a deep dive into Mthobisi Mncube's cell phone evidence from 26 October 2014, the very day Senzo Meyiwa was shot and killed. We'll examine what the state says it proves, what the defense says it disproves, and why this digital trail has become one of the most fiercely contested pieces of evidence in the case. Now, stay until the end because what we are about to unpack here could completely change how you look at this evidence of cell phone, the digital evidence. First things first, the phone that refused to stay silent. One thing that I like, there's something that Ram Siple normally says, what's good for the gander what's good for the goose must be good for the gander. I don't know whether vice versa is, but he always says something like that. Now, you would remember that these people, the state, has used this cell phone of Mncube to say that he was at Vosloorus on the 26th of October. So they cannot now not want the same cell phone to be with Mncube when he is not around Vosloorus and in Johannesburg. They can't. They just can't do that. So when investigators extracted data from Mncube's cell phone, they didn't just recover call records. They recovered photographs, movement history inferred from cell phone tower connections, incoming and outgoing calls, and digital timestamp messages, incoming messages and outgoing messages. To the prosecution, this information helped build a circumstantial case. To the defense, it raises serious questions about whether Mncube could have been at the crime scene, murder crime scene at all. The same phone, the same records, two completely different interpretations from the defense and the state. Okay. Secondly, the morning movement. So the cell phone evidence showed us Mncube around Joburg taking pictures, etc. It shows us Moy Street and what is that? Moy Street and I forgot the other name. Main and Moy Street. Yeah, Main and Moy Street. It shows that because he was in those flats that he was staying in. I think it's George Goch. I could be wrong. I think it's George Goch. Now, let the cell phone records indicate that Mncube's phone connected as the day was moving. Towers serving the Phosphorus or Fosco area during the afternoon, right? That point by itself has never been the defense main dispute. Instead, the defense argument is straightforward. Being or around Phosphorus earlier in the day does not automatically mean someone was present at the Khumalo home during the shooting that evening. The other thing is Mncube does admit that yes, we traveled to Phosphorus. We were at Lesedi, Mazubuko Hostel. That is where we were. And we stayed there for some time. And then we went back to Johannesburg. He counted, they were driving a Kumbi. It was Celimpilo Ndawonde. It was Mabungu. It was Mapisa. It was Mncube. It was who else? There is another name. Spiva, I think. Then there is another name. I think it was about 6 people that were in the car with them. Now, he does admit that, yes, they went to Lesedi, because the towers that are sprayed view, those are other towers. The Lesedi towers also, Muleleki tower also. So those towers are around the townships there, Zabo, Katlehong. So yes, it does ping the cell phone. Right now, location at one time, the location at one point in time does not establish location hours later. So just because his phone was pinging there during the day about 12, 1, 2, 3, it does not necessarily mean that at 7 o'clock he was also still there, because it's pinging somewhere else now. And that distinction became central to the courtroom debate. Thirdly, the towers started telling a story from this cell phone evidence still. As the afternoon progressed, the phone stopped connecting only to Phosphorus area towers. Instead, it began registering on different towers, Helderberg Road, Little Red, and later towers associated with Johannesburg Central Business District. This suggests that suggested movement away from Phosphorus and toward Johannesburg. The defense argued that the tower sequence reflected travel back toward the city, just like it was doing a travel from the city to Abolesedi, Emazibuko Hostel. Now, the prosecution, however, urged that the court to consider the phone evidence alongside all other evidence in the case rather than in isolation. Fair enough. Then the critical hours. The critical hours, the shooting at the Khumalo home, you would remember that it occurred during the evening. According to evidence from Zandile Khumalo on the 18th of July, she said the incident happened between 7:30 p.m. and 8 p.m., but that was before 8. That is, she made it perfectly clear, it's on the record. And now, if that happened at that time, now let's see where Mncube was around this time. The defense highlighted that around this crucial period, the phone was connecting to towers serving Johannesburg CBD area, such as Hall Street and Moy Street. That is where Mncube's phone was pinging. So we can't now want to use the phone for pinging in Phosphorus and not want it to ping in Johannesburg and say when it pings to Phosphorus, Mncube was there, and then when it pings to Holt Street, Mncube was not there. Hell no. It can't be. If the phone was with Mncube in Phosphorus, that means the phone is still with Mncube in Johannesburg. So the defense maintains that those tower connections, then those support the argument that he was not in Phosphorus at the time of the shooting, especially according to what Zandile was saying. But the prosecution is not required to accept that. the phone always reflected Mncube's precise location. Fair enough. That's what they don't want to accept. This is one of the questions the court will have to ultimately have to weigh themselves. Another interesting part was the photographs that started a storm. Then came those photographs because the investigators also recovered images from the phone that were said to have been taken on the 26th of October 2014. The prosecution relied on these images as part of its broader case, arguing that they depicted Mncube with dreadlocks and clothing that could be compared with aspects of witness descriptions. Now, when it comes to this, Mncube's dreadlocks were long, sorry, it's not a human. They were long. He had longer dreadlocks that were going like this, and they were plaited. So the person that they said came in had shorter dreadlocks that only up to here. And if you look at those pictures, the drawings of Steenkamp, you would see that both people that alleged to be intruders, both of them had dreadlocks. And the second person that they say was the intruder, which is accused number 2, Bongani Ntanzi, never had dreadlocks in his life. And the first one that they say is accused number 3, Mncube, he did have dreadlocks, but they were not short. They were not short. So do you see, Uguti, this is becoming interesting. Now, when they are busy comparing these descriptions, there is nothing that links Mncube into this situation at all, even if they want to. Now, the defense pushed back strongly. They argue that having dreadlocks is not unique and that hairstyle alone cannot identify a perpetrator. Eyewitness descriptions themselves varied on complexion, clothing, height, and other features, which is a very big problem. The court therefore has to determine what weight, if any, these photographs deserves. But for me, they deserve so much weight because they are not depicting what the prosecution said. Now, then there was the metadata issue. That was another battle. The most technical dispute wasn't about the photos themselves. It was about the metadata. When exactly were the images created? Were the timestamps original? Did the extraction process alter any information? Were all photographs recovered from cell phone disclosed to the defense or only selected images? These questions became a major courtroom issue. Let me tell you something. They were not going to tamper with the cell phone picture, with the photographs, because they wanted them to tell a story. But little did they know that the descriptions of the people inside the house of the so-called intruders, including these pictures, it's going to bring a vibe that no one can come back from. Do you understand? Because now that is the suffering that they are having, because these pictures are giving them problems. Now, the prosecution maintained that the digital evidence formed part of an overall evidential picture, of which it is this evidential picture that these pictures are giving is that Mncube had nothing to do with the crime. Now, here is where things become especially important. A cell phone may not prove that someone, where were they? Do you understand? It records where the handset connected to the network. People can lend phones to others. Phones can be left behind, etc., etc. Now, the argument is that if they are saying this cell phone was with Mncube during the day, why would it not be with him at night? Do you understand? Now, a single tower may serve users over a broad geographic area. Fair enough. That is why courts generally consider cell phone evidence alongside other evidence rather than treating it as conclusive on its own. Now, the defense strategy is that the defense position can be summarized like this. Yes, Mncube had the phone. Yes, he traveled during the day, but the digital trail, they argue, places the handset in Johannesburg during the critical period rather than at the crime scene. From that perspective, the cell phone evidence support reasonable doubt rather than guilty. Now, the state also, their case is different. they are arguing that no single piece of evidence should determine the outcome. Instead, the court should evaluate everything: the cell phone records, witness testimony, photographs, sequence of events, and all other circumstantial evidence together. But wait, when it comes to cell phone records, it's telling a story that Ncube has nothing to do with this crime. When it comes to witness testimony, their descriptions are saying that is not Ncube. They are describing. Photographs are saying, guys, you got it all wrong, because his pictures from that day are not the ones are telling us that he's not the one that was there. He's not dark skinned, he's light skinned, and he had long dreadlocks. Do you understand? So it's becoming hard for the state. Now, even if after all, after considering the entire body of evidence, the court will decide whether the state has proved its case beyond reasonable doubt. Yes, that's what the court must do. But look at the evidence that the state brought here. Now, this is why Mthobise Mncube's cell phone has become one of the most important exhibits in the Senzo Meyiwa trial. It is not because the phone alone proves guilt, nor because it automatically proves innocence, because it is because both the prosecution and the defense believe the same digital evidence supports their competing versions of events. In the end, the court will have to decide how much weight to attach to the cell phone records, the photographs, the metadata, and the broader context in which they were presented. And that decision could play a significant role in the final outcome of one of South Africa's most closely watched criminal trials. If you've made it this far watching this video, thank you so much. I really appreciate you. Let me know your thoughts, quick comment section. How much weight do you think Judge Rata should place on the cell phone towers, evidence, and digital photographs when deciding this criminal case? And if you find my analysis valuable, don't forget to like, share, subscribe at Noni M Podcast, and turn on your notification bell so that you never miss our in-depth coverage of the Senzo Meyiwa trial. And I will see you on our next video. Bye-bye.